HG roasts. Bonnie Blue. Another narcissist comes in for a roasting. Make sure you hit the hype button so more people learn about this justified roasting as I, H.G. Tudor, the unparalleled cartographer of the narcissistic mind, emerges once again to dissect another specimen writhing in the spotlight of self-inflicted notoriety. Today, the roast, the flames turn to one Bonnie Blue, a name that evokes not the poetic serenity of a tranquil sea, but rather the garish hue of a cheap neon sign flickering above a tawdry establishment, promising thrills that invariably disappoint. Bonnie, who parades as the Empress of Empowerment while cloaked in the tattered rags of desperation, I'm going to illuminate the cavernous voids, and not just that between your legs, but that in your life. You are not a trailblazer. You are a textbook case of the narcissist. All bluster, no substance, a whirlwind of hypocrisy, unpleasantness, and unbridled self-absorption that leads a trail of bewildered victims and bemused and disgusted onlookers in your wake. Let's begin with the origins. Bonnie Blue, born into what one might charitably describe as a milieu of moral ambiguity, first emerged from the Antipodes, Australia to be precise, though her antics have since infested the shores of Britain like an invasive species with a penchant for publicity stunts. Reports suggest a childhood marred by the darkest of shadows, child sexual abuse, with images from her youth betraying a vulnerability that screams for sympathy. Yet, how does Bonnie respond to such trauma? Not with quiet resilience or therapeutic introspection. Oh, no. Driven by her narcissism, she transforms it into fuel for her insatiable narcissistic engine, pimping out her pain, or, so the whispers go, under the alleged orchestration of her own family. Her ex-husband, a privileged product of private schooling, and even her mother scout recruits for her carnal escapades. Imagine that. A woman who claims to champion female autonomy, yet dances to the tune of familial puppeteers. Hypocrisy, it's the very foundation of her empire. She preens as a self-made millionaire, raking in fortunes from OnlyFans. Yet, if these accounts hold water, she's little more than a marionette in a seedy family business, her strings pulled by those who ought to have protected her. How empowering, Bonnie, trading one form of exploitation for another, all the while lecturing the world on liberation. But the rise to infamy, Bonnie's breakthrough, if one can call it that without retching, came during the bacchanalian haze of spring break in Cancun 2024. There she descended like a vulture upon the unsuspecting flocks of college lads, boasting of bedding over 100 in a frenzied fortnight, all captured on film for her subscribers' voyeuristic delight. Empowerment, she crows, as if reducing human connection to a conveyor belt of conquests somehow elevates the female spirit. Yet, what do we find beneath? A predator in stilettos, targeting the barely legal, the inexperienced, the virgins fresh from their dorms. She brags of rearranging her insides with dads, husbands, students, and barely legal 18-year-olds, quipping that she doesn't care if they're barely legal or barely breathing. Charming, isn't it? Her unpleasantness drips from every syllable, a crude vulgarity that masquerades as candour, but reveals only a soul coarsened by its own excesses. If a man uttered such tripe, scouting universities for naive young women to rearrange, he'd be branded a monster, hounded by pitchforks, both virtual and real. But Bonnie, she's hailed by some as an icon, a double standard gleaming like a tarnished trophy. Hypocrisy at its finest, decrying patriarchal objectification while embodying it, validating the basest male fantasies under the guise of agency. Not content with tropical debauchery, she set her sights on the hallowed halls of British academia. Freshers' Week in Nottingham became her next hunting ground, where she announced plans to offer free encounters to 18-year-old virgins, as if deflowering the impressionable were a public service rather than a predatory ploy. The outrage was swift and delicious. Local authorities barred her, universities issued warnings, and the public recoiled in horror. Yet, did this deter this narcissist? Of course not. She thrives on the fuel, be it adoration or abhorrence, and she lacked it up with like a cat at a saucer of cream. Her unpleasantness has shone through in interviews, where she spewed bile that would make even the most retrograde chauvinist blush. Women are hypocrites, she declares on podcasts, sharing controversial dating rules while positioning herself as the oracle of male desires. She validates the worldview of these horrible men who view women as disposable commodities, all the while claim to shatter glass ceilings. She's regressive, not revolutionary. She's not breaking change, she's forging new ones, gilded with OnlyFans subscriptions. And then, the pièce de résistance, the fake pregnancy scandal of early 2025. Bonnie, ever the manipulator, announced her pregnancy with the flair of a sideshow barker, only to later confess it was all a ruse for media attention. She claimed the proceeds from selling the story would fund somebody's IVF treatment, a noble twist, she insists, born of passion. Passion? More like an instinctive gambit to harvest sympathy fuel while padding her own coffers. Here lies the narcissism in full bloom. The grandiosity of believing one's deceptions are benevolent. The lack of empathy for those genuinely struggling with infertility who endure years of heartache only to see their pain mocked for clicks. Bonnie lied, profited, and then patted herself on the back for generosity. She fabricated drama, reaped the rewards, and reframed it as altruism to maintain the appearance of caring. Utterly unpleasant, she toyed with the sacred human experience, reducing it to a marketing ploy. All the while, her followers hung on her every fabricated heartbeat. Divorce, too, adds a layer to this tapestry of turmoil. Fresh from her split, details murky, but whispers suggest it was acrimonious as her public persona, she parades a surprise new love interest amid her X-rated escapades. One moment she's bedding the hordes for content and prizing open that between her legs like a cheese toastie, and the next she's cooing over monogamy. Hypocrisy once again. The woman who brags of sleeping with 122 students now playing the romantic lead as if her heart weren't as commodified as her body. And let's not forget her foray into cuckoldry, preparing videos with a man and his wife, pushing boundaries not for liberation but for shock value, the narcissist drug of choice. It's all fuel for her, the gasps, the judgments, the subscriptions. Your unpleasant manifests in this relentless pursuit of extremity, where nothing is sacred, not even the sanctity of others' relationships. Lately, her tentacles extend to the vulnerable fringes of fame. Enter Little Tay, the child internet sensation turned barely legal OnlyFans aspirant. Bonnie, ever the opportunist narcissist, reportedly schemed to collaborate, scouting her before the clock struck 18, poised to blow up their content the moment legality dawned. Accusations of predation fly thick and fast. High-key a paedophile, some say, her behaviour reeking of exploitation. Why target the freshly adult, the unscarred? Because your narcissism demands easy conquests, pliable minds to mould into mirrors of your own distorted self-image. You're not mentoring, you're grooming, validating your existence through the corruption of innocence. If the roles were reversed, a man lurking at the threshold of a girl's majority, the pitchforks would ignite, yet you slither by, your hypocrisy shielded by the skirt of female empowerment. A woman who potentially has endured abuse perpetuates cycles of objectification under the banner of business savvy. The documentary, 1000 Men and Me, The Bonnie Blue Story, serves as her magnus opus of self-aggrandizement. A Channel 4 spectacle that has tongues wagging and advertisers fleeing. Explicit photos, semen-smeared visages, gangbangs presented as feminist triumphs. It's all there. A carnival of carnality that drew anger for its brazenness. She postures as a savvy businesswoman, earning millions monthly, yet the film exposes the hollowness. A life reduced to metrics of men bedded, dollars earned, controversies courted. You only need to look at that face, dead behind the eyes. There's nothing there. She thrives in such an environment, the scorecard of the insecure, proof of worth in a world that otherwise deems you irrelevant. She who decries judgment invites it with open arms and legs, then feigns victimhood when backlash bites. The film's crude candour, her quips about enjoying gangbangs repel more than they reveal, a treatment to a personality as abrasive as sandpaper on silk. In her podcasts and pronouncements, her unpleasantness reaches operatic heights. She dissects what men really want, positioning herself as the arbiter of desires while dismissing other women as hypocrites. It's a masterclass in projection. the narcissist's favourite parlour trick, accusing others of her own flaws. She challenges norms on love, even offering tips on spotting the latter via body language, in terms of trying to identify narcissists, oblivious to the irony that she embodies it, the grandiosity, the entitlement, the relentless need for fuel. Her dating rules? Controversial only in their banality, laced with misogyny that reinforces the very patriarchy she pretends to dismantle. Entertaining in the way a train wreck captivates rubberneckers. She is the clown in the circus of self-delusion, honking her horn while the tent collapses around her. Yet, let's not overlook the societal enablers. Media outlets fawn or fulminate, but either way they feed the beast. A decade ago, a similar stunt, an 18-year-old's holiday indiscretion, drew crucifixion. Today, Bonnie's exploits earn platforms, documentaries, debates. Why? Because the narcissism sells, and hers is a particularly virulent strain, infecting young minds with the notion that prostitution is a career pinnacle. Do better, ladies, some plead, urging careers, family, self-respect. But Bonnie Blue scoffs, her unpleasantness a silent call to the lost. Sell your body, chase the limelight, ignore the void within. She promotes autonomy while eroding it, a feminist facade crumbling under the weight of her own contradictions. Her personal life unravels like a poorly knit sweater, divorced yet swiftly ensnared in new entanglements. She juggles lovers with the dexterity of a juggler on amphetamines. Her brags of bedding students while eyeing married couples reveals narcissism unbound by ethics. Control is her currency. Others are mere props in her psychodrama. She lies, she betrays trust, she exploits, she laughs at the struggles of others, and all of it is there for her to utilize for her own purposes. Bonnie Blue, a clear narcissist, overused, dead on the inside, nothing behind the eyes, believing that she's empowered herself when all she does is prostitute herself. And yet, whilst of course question marks can be raised about all of those that have gone between those legs and had their sloppy 130 seconds and the rest, the fact remains that this is an individual that believes that she does well, and yet so much of the world despises of her, and she feeds on that contempt, that dislike, that lust, for she is doomed to always do so, narcissist that she is. Bonnie Blue, roasted, yet again.